Okay.
Welcome back to A Plus Parents, everyone. And I have a super special treat for you today. So with me today is Laura Mansfield. And so first, I just have to give you some background on Laura because, when sometimes we say someone's extraordinary and you're like, oh yeah, right. But I want you to get this world of extraordinary who we get to be with today. So first of all, 30 years of experience as an entrepreneur, an executive leader, a contractor, a teacher, it just everything, a business consultant, a business coach, business owner. So she started running her own business when she was 19 years old. And here we are doing a podcast, but something that you'll find out about Laura, we'll talk a little bit about this. She is known in the world as really a pioneer in podcasting, one of the first ever. And when she first got started, podcasting wasn't even a thing, and it kind of came online. And when I say online, like more mainstream, right? But her first program was called Parenting Unplugged, and she ran that with her husband for 8 years. She has 2 sons, and one's in college and one's still in high school. So as you know, now let's keep going, right? So she's a nonprofit executive director. She was listed and not too long ago, we'll say recently, right, as the under 40 in Portland, Oregon, where that's the top 40 business people that are under 40 years old. And so what a great distinction to have. But she's been able to be a guest on NPR, has that opportunity to talk about being an entrepreneur and what it is. She's started, sold, ran, kind of outsourced businesses over the years. So lots of experience in there. She's been interviewed by Forbes Magazine, which is really cool. And we'll tell you about her website because you probably want to find out more about her, but she leads retreats. And so just all kinds of great stuff. And as we were talking, I found out that Laura's even taken a 2-year trip where they did a 2-year homeschooling journey because they got rid of everything they had and off they went. And they spent 2 years on the road from 2016 to 18. So everything that it looks like in being busy, being married, having children, running businesses, selling businesses, starting new businesses, and then continuing on, right? And that kind of like how you balance all that. So we're going to get into all of that today. So first, Laura, thank you for making your day work to be here. And, welcome to A Plus Parents.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. So, okay. So with telling a little bit about who you are, anything else you want to tell us about you?
Oh, no, I think that was plenty. Thank you. It's actually a bit embarrassing. So I appreciate you sharing it all. And yes, I think the big takeaway is that there's always lots of roles that we play in our lives. And so I just happen to have, all different kinds of hats. So,
right.
Which is quite fun in the way that I get to live my life. I feel very grateful and blessed. So no, it's all good. My story was perfect.
It was perfect. Okay, great. So I think one of the things, because hearing everything that you've been up to and being recognized by, organizations that have recognized you, oftentimes you people that, go down that path, they don't always find balance in their life, and I know when you had sent me some info about you, and one of the things you said, your favorite job is being a mom, and that's like, that's at the top, right? Yet there's having that and having a marriage for 24 years. And then on top of that, doing all the things you've done as an entrepreneur, right? How is even having balance? Is it even possible, like, to be able to balance all that?
Such a great question. I would say that actually, I don't know necessarily if I believe in balance. I think I believe that you give attention to where it's needed in the moment. So it's sort of this flow. I call it the river. So it's kind of like my river of life that I flow in. And on any given day, like for example, my kiddo just had a concussion, my youngest son, who's 15. And so I knew that he needed some extra mom love. And so I took off 3 or 4 days just to really spend time with him. And my oldest had a whole big bad breakup with his girlfriend. He probably will really appreciate that I talked about that. And he was very, very sort of hurt and sad. And so we took a road trip together for 2 weeks, and I just sort of stopped everything with work and just took that time to be with him. And I would say that my work colleagues, who I really am grateful for, they all know that my family comes first. And so if something happens with my kids, everything shuts down. My clients all know that my kids are a priority. Everyone I work with, I've always been really clear that my kids come first. And they've always been a part of what I do, like to the extent that one of our first companies that we had, the boys like grew up so much at the office that they started calling all of our work colleagues their aunts and uncles because they didn't know who else their family was. But my idea is that it's all integrated. So I do my very best. And I would say that I'm not perfect and I work hard to be present. And it's sweet now because my boys will say things like, Mom, you're a really good mom. Like, give yourself some credit, or because I'm constantly just trying to figure out, which ball I need to have in the air at any given time, because that's just how life is sometimes. And that's it.
That's awesome. Well, all right. So, you were 19 years old when you started running your first business, right? And then life evolved from there. What got you started and how did you know that you had that entrepreneurial mindset? And because I think oftentimes a lot of our listeners and a lot of our moms that are listening right now, and they're listening right now thinking, what is he going to say? Right. But they know that they have that entrepreneurial mindset, right? And then, but aren't sometimes feel a little stuck about how to express it in the world and how to do that, given everything else that they're handling and managing and, everything else that they have going on. But you recognized it at a young age as a teenager, really. So what kind of got you going, and what was that? Do you remember, thinking back to then, what was it that you had to overcome, or those first steps that you took to just launch yourself into the world? Because I think a lot of times it's just taking that first step. And once you take the first step, things are good and you're on a roll and you can go. So what was that like for you, kind of getting started?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think my parents would say that I just came out as a little entrepreneur, because I think the first thing I did was literally when I was 4 or 5, I organized a fundraiser because I heard my grandma's best friend had MS and I didn't think it was okay. And so I walked to the pizza parlor and got in all this trouble because I left without telling my parents, and convinced the pizza parlor guy to donate pizzas. And then I convinced a face painter at a birthday party I was at to come paint my grandma's friends' faces and raised money for MS. So it was just sort of like in my blood. And what I would say too, though, is that the biggest thing for me is that I had to not listen to the shoulds. So I hope this isn't inappropriate to say on your show, Dennis, but I will say my friend Keith says, don't should on me. Like, don't tell me what I can and cannot do. Yeah. And so I think that that's some of the hardest work for me was like not listening to the external voices and really listening to my internal voice and knowing that this is what I'm here to do. Like, I'm here to catalyze things. This is always what I've been here to do. And I'm here to hold space for people. And I'm here to help people see that spark within them. And so I think it's that really going inside and acknowledging, okay, I really have something I want to do. And so with knowing that about myself, I'm going to figure out how that comes to fruition. And you don't have to do it all at once. It's that as you pray, move your feet, right? That African proverb is okay. So I know I want to do this. So what's my first step and what's my second step? And then really what else has always helped me is I get these visions, right? These visions, that's extreme. I get these ideas, let's say that. And I will sit down and I'll write what I think that idea to be, and it will always change. But what's so potent about writing it down is that it gives me a place to start. And so I can say, okay, if this is what the idea is, and if this is my North Star, what are the first 3 steps I need to take to get there? And then how do I take one step every day? And that's it, one step. And, they always say at the end of the year, you've taken 360. And I have a rule that I take it every day. Like, it's not just like Saturday and Sunday. Yes, they're the weekend, but my family, my boys, especially now they're teenagers. I know others have little ones, and I have such empathy and love and joy for you. And so all the emotions. But because my boys are older, they sleep now. They sleep in. So I get up at 5:36 every morning and I do my routine, and then I take my one step. And then I'm done with the step that I have for that day. So I think it's just finding some strategies that you can do in whatever stage of life you are. So if you have a new little one, when they're sleeping and you're nursing, like write down your step. Or get a piece of paper. If you have kids that are older, because you're obviously listening to a homeschool podcast, finding that moment in time when you can do that. The other thing that I do is I've always included my kids in what I do. And so they're little entrepreneurs of their own now. So both of them have their own, like one of them saved and bought his first property. He's 18. And the other one is, has all these business ideas, but he's writing a novel. So I think like bringing your kids along on the journey, some people believe that that's not healthy. I believe that's just it's super healthy because it's an integrated way to live your life. So back to the, like, bring your kids along.
Yeah.
And I never had girls. So for those of you who have girls, oh, blessings. And I just like, I think how can we just continue to raise like strong and smart and bold girls? And so part of that is like living our own purpose, right? Living our own who we are and letting them see that. And same with boys, letting boys see us live into what our dreams are.
Wow, that's amazing. And it's in, in the homeschool world, right? That's we deal with the shoulds, right? Of what you should do this, should not do this, or in that place of you shouldn't homeschool, right? And so a lot of our homeschool families have overcome that. Homeschooling now has, we kind of went from this time of like, why are you doing that? To now, how are you doing that? And it's kind of like
Totally.
the question has changed now, right? Which has been really, really awesome. If you don't mind, just for a moment, because I want to go back to Parenting Unplugged, because, being in the podcast world back when you were and getting started, and you did it for 8 years, and you guys recorded like over 500 episodes. And it wasn't just like you were giving your tips on parenting. You were out discovering parenting from interviewing and talking to top professionals in the world that, had parenting ideas. Just tell us a little bit about the show. And I mean, just thinking like 500 episodes, that's huge, right?
Oh, it was so fun. And it was, so my husband and I co-hosted it together. I feel so sad that I can't send people the episodes. We lost all of our episodes in a fire. It's a long story, but, you can still go and see us, but there's nothing there. So my husband and I co-hosted the show. And our intention was to learn more about being better parents. So our intention was to expand our horizons beyond like everyone that was right in front of us. And so we went to all different sources. We had like Peggy O'Mara, who was a huge advocate actually of homeschooling. She had Mothering Magazine at the time. She was one of my all-time, I really idolized her at the time, and she came on and was a guest a few times, like Bob Sears, who had conversations about vaccinations and spreading them out and what does that look like. And then we had like the free range parent folks, we had the conscious family women, we had just everything. Like it didn't really matter where you sat on the spectrum or what your thoughts were. We just wanted to hear from you. I will say, and we had positive discipline, and we did everything. Like we just wanted to hear about all of it. And then we thought people could pick and choose what they were interested in and design their own way of being parents, instead of like telling them what it was that they needed to do. And I have a deep belief that we as moms and dads too, if we're tapped in as dads, we know what our kids need. Like we grew this baby inside of us, so we know what is best for our kiddos, right? And yet the world sometimes tells us something different. And so that the podcast was really to help cultivate that internal belief in like the knowing, like that listening to the knowing, which a lot of your listeners, I'm sure, already do because they homeschool and they've made that decision, so.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, okay. So, having the opportunity to interview that many people, right? And then having your own background as a mom, right? And having a family and as an entrepreneur, how do you see, and you kind of talked about this a little bit about, having the kids be part of what you're doing, which I think is just brilliant, and I think a lot of our families really aspire to that, right? Do you see anything about how parenting and entrepreneurship, how they flow together? Like what do you see there, given that you've had this wealth of information come in about parenting and you're an entrepreneur and you've been running businesses for several years? So how do you see those things flowing together?
That's funny. So I think I'll use an analogy. So I'm Irish, so I'll tell stories in order to teach usually. And so we traveled, you mentioned my family, we traveled around the world. And it was a little under 2 years, but we traveled around the world for quite a chunk of time. And we decided to global school. And I'm putting quotes around this because it's not the official way of schooling, right? We decided to global school our kids. Because we felt like our kids needed something different than what they were getting at the time. And in that, we could have come up with this curriculum and like sat them down at the table every day. And actually we tried, and it was just an argument every day. So I'm not going to say like we were perfect to begin with. And I had this kind of epiphany that, oh my gosh, this is a living classroom. Like we are in a living classroom. We are in, Thailand or Tasmania or India. Like, so let's ask the people around us to be our children's teachers. Like, let's figure out like where, we live with a Maori family in New Zealand. So let's see if they're willing to teach us about the Maori traditions. And they sang us into a lodge, and they learned like what it would be to be Maori. We were in Chiang Mai, and we were up in the mountains with the mahouts, and we asked the mahouts if they could teach our boys what it would be like, what it is to be a mahout. And so we lived with them for a bit, and and paid them, and but lived that life for a few weeks. So for me, like life is the classroom. Like the world is. So when it comes to entrepreneurship, same when we were traveling, the boys did our budgets. We had the spreadsheets, and the boys tracked the spreadsheet, and they learned to build a profit and loss statement, and they had $50 a day. And then they got to prioritize like what were their top things. And at age 12, of course, it was, wireless for my son. So he picked a place to stay in Indonesia that he thought, had the best wireless, but then it had sewage running through the room. So he had to all right, how do we weigh? Like, do you want sewage running through the room so you can have good wireless? Or are you willing to give up your wireless so that you can, not have sewage in the room?
Right.
So, it was like very hands-on learning of how life is how we learn. And so that's kind of what I think for me as a mom and as an entrepreneur and as just I'm an out of the box thinker, clearly, was what are the skills that actually are going to help my children in life, not necessarily what I'm being told to teach my children. And yet, interestingly, we took that, year plus off from school. We did global schooling, but essentially off, and they got back and they flowed right back into school. Our youngest, we found out when we were traveling, was not reading yet, which was shocking to us. He had been in a Waldorf school, and there's, different theories in Waldorf about like you let your child, get to when they can learn. And that works for a lot of kids. And for some reason, it just hadn't worked for him because he has a photographic memory is why. So he would look at something, remember that. And so that, so or he would have his brother read it, or he had like all these strategies. And so we ended up keeping him home for an additional year. I shouldn't say we, I should say my husband powered through that for an additional year of getting him reading, and then, figured out different ways to do it. But again, our life was a classroom. And so I think that was a huge learning for me.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think if you're running a business, if you're looking at running a business, being an entrepreneur, and I always say those are, you can be an entrepreneur and not run a business, or most entrepreneurs do run a business, but being an entrepreneur, like really being up to something, right? Yeah. That when you look at it from, well, what does life look like, and having everything inside of what you're doing, I think that's awesome. When you're looking at, so we looked at like there's parenting and entrepreneurship, right? Well, also leadership, there's, as parents, we're leading, and as homeschool educators, we're homeschool families and we're teaching, and, we often have to make that shift from parent to teacher, back to parent, back to teacher, so there's always like taking those hats on and off and moving them around, but there's also providing leadership, right? So when you're looking from there, how would you say like parenting and leadership, how do you see those being similar to each other as well?
Oh, I love that. So I'm just finishing a book with my colleague, Teresa Yanakawa-Bundren, and it's called Listen Leader. And it's rooted in these 8 tenets that we have been working with for over a decade. And the reason I bring that up is because those 8 tenets, I think, are universal. And they really apply to not only being in the corporate space, but they also apply to just life, because that's in the end, what leadership is, in my opinion, is how do we lead ourselves? How do we lead our team, which in this situation is our family? And then how do we lead beyond those, our concentric circles? What does that look like? Like, how do we show up in the world in a way that is going to have a positive impact or impact positive change? And so if we're able, so these tenets are vulnerability, trust, true humility, integrity, they're all on our website. But as we think of being a parent and a teacher and those different hats and that shift of like needing to stand in a leader teacher seat, which, by the way, I'm just going to do an asterisk and say huge amounts of humility from me, like, and respect and props and all the things for the moms that go from teacher to mother all day long, because it's exhausting enough to be a mom. And so really being able to stand in that, in my core, and think of myself as a leader for my children of whatever that path is moving forward, and how I can lead in every interaction at every level. And for me, I think of that as my role, but also how do I cultivate that in my children in a way that I model things that they then can emulate, like that we know that over 70% of parenting is as modeling behaviors. And so how do we choose those behaviors that feel so important to us as a parent, but also as that child becomes the adult? I had somebody once say to me that imagine your kids are adults. Like, what do you want them to be then? Like, parent to that adult. Don't parent to what everything looks like in the moment. Like, think of that. And then the other one that I really reflect on as we think about leadership is I have these beautiful colleagues who wrote this book called Optimal Parenting, and they have this lovely theory they call the dance. And the dance is, as we give our kids what we didn't have, we heal it within ourselves. So that beautiful figure eight that happens when we actually look at our like little wounded self inside ourselves, and we find where those wounds are, and then we meet our children from a place of love and empathy and care, instead of from a place of like, because we're wounded, Right. So how do we make that shift to be able to lead ourselves first and sort of hold that intention to be more conscious ourselves and show up in a way that is transformational for ourselves and for our children? So
wow, that's really amazing. And I like you said, you're leading or teaching to the parent or to the adult they're going to be, right? Yes. And not necessarily. That is huge. I'm like, oh man, that's just so great, right? And you get to look and see who they are, who they're going to be, who they are interested in being, and you can lead them in that direction. And you're being a parent at the same time, so it's really great. And it's interesting because as you were sharing, one of the things is like, when our kids are born, right, and they're all different. Right. So, my kids are all different from each other, different learning styles, different personalities, everything different. Right. And it's not like when they're born, out pops an instruction manual that says, here's how to manage this one. Right. Or this is the best kind of, it's not like what kind of gasoline do you put in the engine? Right. It's like they don't come out like that. And so, for most of us, like our ideas of parenting, our ideas are literally discovered while we're being a parent. Right. So have you noticed for yourself, like there is, like parenting taught you how to be a parent, right? So it wasn't like you didn't know, you had to discover it. And the only way you could discover it was by being one. So what would you say, like, as being a parent now of a high schooler and a college student, and, and seeing the things they've done, 18 years old and buying their own home. I mean, that's amazing, right? So as you see that, what would you say, how has parenting taught you, or what have you, gained from parenting that has had you become a parent?
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So whole slew of things I want to say. I think to start, my kids, I have emotion on this. My kids are my greatest teachers by far. And every time, each time I had a new child, I felt like I went through a rebirth, like that I became a different human. And I think part of doing Parenting Unplugged was to explore different ways of parenting because my boys were so different. And for one, this way of parenting called natural learning rhythms worked really well for him. And for the other one, he was definitely a positive discipline guy. Like he needed structure and he needed a way to do it. And they were so different. And what that taught me was how to meet people on the bridge. Like what that taught me was how to really actively listen to what they need instead of projecting onto my kids what I think they need. It's really listening to, I'm here to hold space just for a hot minute so they can get to a place where they're an adult and they're able to really thrive in the world. And so how do I hold that space in a effective is an interesting word, in a way that's going to meet them in their place, in what they need. So I think that's my biggest learning. And as a mom, I say this to my kids all the time. I'm so honored. Like I'm so honored that somehow I got to raise these boys, and I'm so honored to be their mom. And I think as I sit in that awe, that is also a place of transformation too, and a place of gratitude. As I'm grateful, I learn. And there are moments, don't get me wrong, like I'm never going to say I did this perfectly or even right for that matter. I have no idea what it right or wrong is. I just did the best I could. And that would be what I would say has made the difference to my kids, is that they saw that I was trying and I was doing the best I could and that I loved them. And I think at the core, it's that love that will get us through anything. So just remembering to come from that place of love with my kids and really trying to sit in that, even in the hardest of moments when I feel like I want to throw them off a bridge, right?
Yeah. There's people that are going, I've had that thought once or twice, right?
and it's not that like I'm ever going to do that. And not that I, but like when they're gnawing at me, that 13-year-old that's like, you're the worst mom ever. Why can't you just be normal? Like when we were traveling around the world, we called it the 7-day meltdown. My 13-year-old would be like, that's it, I'm leaving. And we'd be like in the middle of India. I'd be like, all right, well, I'll see you when you get back. And he'd walk up and there's nowhere to go, he'd like slam it again. And I was like, I am feeling like, and it happened this weekend. My 15-year-old was just, he was just being nasty. And he said, he came up, he's like, I'm sorry, Mom, for yelling like that. I'm like, you know what? I just need a moment. I just need some space because truth be told, I have violent thoughts right now. And I just need to do some deep breathing, and I'm going to need you to walk away from me. And then we can talk when I feel a little bit better. So,
Wow.
We do the best we can.
That's awesome. Yeah. So they're giving us what? They're giving us the instruction manual on how to be parents, which is great. And people.
Right.
So
I mean,
that's
and my husband and I used to joke that you have to have a driver's manual to drive, but like there's no manual for parenting. So how do we build our own manuals? And it is, if we can really sit in the dance and really have humility and not like go into our ego of like, this is the way it's supposed to be, here are all the rules. I think we learn just as much, if not more, from our kids. Like we become different people because that's the opportunity. That's
absolutely. All right. It's so great. Okay. So the website because I know people are going to want to see, how do they find out more about you and get more information? I know you have a women's retreat going on and you're going to be traveling to Greece. It sounds so cool, right? Yeah. So for people that want to find out more about you, it's the taprootway.com. Right. Yes. And we'll have the site linked up in the show notes. But when people are on your site, what do you have resources for them, or what would they see when they get on there?
Yeah. So when you get on the taprootway.com, there you'll see the 8 tenets. You'll see we talk about placing belonging in the center, which works beautifully for our kids too. How do we cultivate belonging? And there's all sorts of tools on there to talk about that. There's also the Greece immersion. If you're interested in the Greece immersion, send me an email, which my email is there, or it will go to my EA and she'll get to me. Because it's an invite only experience, but that doesn't mean, there's no exclusion. We just do a little interview and we only are taking 22 women on that experience. And it's all about like a holistic experience of our lives. That's what the immersion is about in Greece. So on the Taproot Way, there will be tools. check it out. If you're more interested in some other things, email me and I can send them to you. There's lots and lots of just all different kinds of resources. It's sort of what people are in need of, right? Meeting them on the bridge. So
Absolutely.
feel free
That's
to
so
send,
cool.
yeah, feel free to send me or my
And you have a book that you and Tressa was actually a guest on our show a little while back. So it's so great.
Right.
And I didn't know then that you guys were writing this book together. So super cool.
Yeah.
When are you planning to have that completed and released?
Yes, so it's called Listen Leader, and it will be released, I think, this fall. I'm hoping. It's been a journey. It's been an adventure. But we're getting there. We're getting to the book release, so we'll see. It might be the spring. We just, with COVID and all the things, it's been a bit of there was a pause and then a restart. So we're figuring.
No worries. Well, what we'll do then is when the book's out and when the release date comes in, maybe what we could do is have you and Tressa come on together and we could talk about the book and just what you guys are up to.
That'd be
It'd be
so
awesome,
fun. I'd
right?
love to. Yeah, that'd be great. Absolutely. Thank you
Very
so
cool.
much, Dennis.
Oh,
Yeah.
that would be awesome. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for tuning in, Laura. Thanks for making your day work to be here. And I know you got up early because of the time zone you're in. So thanks for doing that. And everyone, again, thanks as always for listening to A+ Parents, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.